The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday for April 24th, 2019. This is your International AC Town Hall, and we're so excited to see many of you here today. This is a first town hall of this year, and perhaps first town hall for several years now. This is a great chance to talk, to listen, to share some things that we're talking about as an organization. And so before we get into introducing the panelists, we want to just take a moment to make sure that everyone can hear us. We're broadcasting live. We're also recording this session. And so for those of you that, well, actually make sure am I recording? I'm recording. We are. We are going to be making this as interactive as possible today. And so if you've participated in some of our webinar Wednesdays before, we've had a chance to do some questions at the end. This town hall is going to be even more interactive. In fact, we're going to invite folks to, like a radio show, come on and call in like your favorite radio show. So if you have any questions throughout the time, there'll be a designated time where we'll take some questions. So if you have a microphone, we'll invite you to raise your hand. There should be a hand option on your screen. And we'll allow folks to raise your hand, and then we'll go and try to get through as many questions as we can for each section. So we'll talk a little more about that as we go, but just wanted to bring that up. So if folks wanted to grab their microphones or make sure that access is working, we'll give that a go today. But before we go any further, let's introduce everyone that's going to be on the panel here today. And you should be able to see folks. Oh, where's my agenda slide? There we go. There's our panelists. So my name is Aaron Anderson. I'm president currently of International ACAC and with the University of British Columbia.
Good evening or good afternoon. My name is Michelle Chow Liu, and I'm the VP for Membership. I'm a high school counselor at Western Academy of Beijing.
And hi, everyone. I'm Johanna Fishbein. I'm your immediate past president or current past president, and I'm the head of university advising at UWC of Southeast Asia, the Dover campus.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kristen Driesen. I am an independent educational consultant with Advice in London. I am the past president that immediately preceded Johanna, and I am a current nominee for the NACAC Board of Directors.
Hi, everyone. This is Teresa Schweizer, International ACAC's Executive Director, coming to you from HQ in Arlington, Virginia.
All right. So all panelists are going to be taking a chance to talk with you today, and they'll certainly be available to help answer any questions or provide any comments on the topics today. But as I mentioned, we're going to have a chance to take questions and from you folks. So one of the first things we'll do is let's just experiment. Let's see how everyone is with raising their hand. So on your GoToWebinar control panel, you should see a small icon. So let's just raise your hand there, a little button that says raise your hand. And let's see how many people can raise your hand just like in a virtual classroom, a virtual town hall. Take a moment now to find on your control panel. I think it might be on yours under attendees. There's a little button there. So this is where you're actually going to click on the screen there. All right, looks like everyone's raising their hand. Good to see. Very nice. All right, and then we'll look at this like a good, perhaps, teacher. I can say enough. I can't take any more questions, and I can put all your hands down. There we go. So we'll come back to that in a moment. But for now, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. And this is really about getting really a pulse from you folks. We have, of course, a number of issues, topics that are in our industry at any given time. And this time, as a board, we're hoping to get a little bit of feedback in terms of where we should be concentrating our resources. Coming into the summer, when we all come together around the conference, the board has several days of meetings, and of course, we only have limited time, and we want to be able to use the most of that time during those meetings, well concentrated on the topics that are really mean the most to you. Additionally, our committees will be doing research on a number of different policies in particular, but they wanted to get a sense of which issues they should really be concentrating on doing the most research on looking for potential changes. Of course, the strategic plan is something that we want to be always striving towards, and we started that work last year, but this is the point where we're coming to you as members to get a little bit of feedback on where we're heading in the right direction, to see if the strategic plan is capturing what you think of and what you are picturing in your mind of our association. So all of this is going to be coming together in this format as a webinar, but then tomorrow we will also be releasing a survey to the entire membership on these really these 6 topics. So 3 membership policies, and then the strategic plan, regional support, and elections. So this will just be the first of 2 sort of ways that we can hear from you as members, and it's really all about engaging you and giving you a voice of this association. So certainly there's a number of ways that we connect with the membership through webinars such as this. Of course, the institutes that are regionally happening around the world, coming up in a few weeks in Sofia, for example. Everyone's a fan of the old Facebook. Hope you kids are on the Facebook. Also our Instagram channels, our newsletters, our emails, and other means as well. And so this survey and this town hall is just another means to connect with you as our constituents. So we've got over 100 participants today, and they're coming from all over the world. So before we get going into those 6 topics, why don't we take the chance to survey you with a brief chance to let us know where you're joining us from. So if you've ever participated in a webinar Wednesday before, you know we love to ask this question, as often is the case. So based on where you currently are right now, let's take a minute to answer a poll. So where are you joining us from? Here we go. We're going to launch the poll now, and you can click on the country, the region that you're currently joining us from. Of course, often the time zones has a lot to do with this. And we'll just give it a minute here. Looks like 86% of you have voted. So a few of you have already either gone off to get a coffee or maybe not quite sure geographically where you are in the world. So that's okay. Here we go. All right, let's close the poll and share the results. There we are. So it looks like North America is well represented up early, perhaps in the West Coast, but certainly all the way right well into the day, and in the eastern parts, Europe, Middle East and Africa, and Asia. And this also starts to look like a little bit like our membership as well. Before we get any further, one other poll here. The old question that often you ask in our association and conference and sessions is what side of the desk you are on, what membership group are you representing? And here we are, select one of the following: university, high school, organization, or individual. And it's quite all right if looks like a few of you may need to check your business cards here. That's all right. I know, but this is the main one, the one that's the primary. It looks like 87% are voted. So again, some might not have been able to find your business card, but we will close the poll, share the results. And look at that, there we are. So it's a good representation today. So I think this is going to be really helpful when we get into discussing some of our topics. We have a pretty good, clear, and this is quite well representative of our membership as well. Currently, we have, what is it, Teresa, about 3,400 members in our membership right now?
Just under 3,400, that's right.
That's right, great. All right, so we're going to jump right into, as I mentioned, we have a number of policies that as an association we're considering, and but again, only limited resources necessarily for our volunteers, all volunteers on our committees to be doing some work into where we should be going with some of these memberships, our policies, and one of them is concerning membership. So I'm going to pass it over to our VP of membership to talk a little bit about the first question, and that is membership policy for profit universities. Michelle, do you want to talk us a little bit about through this concept and what we're going to be looking at?
Yep, you can go into the next slides actually. So we've been looking, my team have really kind of preliminary looked at this topic for the past year on and off or so. As you know, we're an affiliate of NACAC, and currently NACAC, their policy for for-profit college and university, they're not eligible for membership. And so that is with us as well. If we look at our numbers, and there's various reasons, as you can see on the slide, why they are not eligible for membership with either organization. If we look at our numbers of universities' growth and increase, in the next slide, Erin. We've had a very healthy increase of university and colleges members since 2006. So there's been a 26 increase for the last few years, since 2016. And we would like that number to increase. And of course, we would like to have a more representation in terms of university members, and as well as high school members and organization and individual members as well. So furthering this thinking, my team have been awesome in looking at the difference between what a for-profit university might look like in the US, a definition of that, and also a definition of what it might look like in outside of the US. Some of the findings they've come up with is that, for example, in the UK, they're all the universities or higher educations are government accredited. Most of the private universities, or so deemed for-profit universities in the UK, they do have loans and incentives for students. Well, all have loans or incentives for students in terms of tuition and maintenance loans. Some of the for-profit universities in certain countries, they're accredited by their Ministry of Education. And so we want to kind of see what the difference between different countries, because international is, as we call it, is international, is the world. We want to be representative of all different types of institutions of higher education. If we look into the next slide, you can see I did a breakdown of the regions in terms of the large portion, and Canada and US the last few years has always been the largest membership in terms of college and university. And that has always been since, I believe, go back to 2012, even when we have our data back then, it's always been the largest number. Of course, we want to look at diversity, and hence the question is where our membership are we aligned with our members, and do they want this to be further pursued?
All right, so there's the little bit of background, and recognizing that the world has certainly different structures for institutions, and in some universities, the for-profit universities, or some countries for the for-profit colleges and universities, may be the most recognized, highest quality, perhaps, institutions. And so this is the question that we will be putting to our members through this survey. As mentioned previously, all of these topics that you will be hearing about today will also come in the form of a survey today or tomorrow. But this is a chance for folks to perhaps ask more detailed questions, or even just voice their opinions directly on the topic. And again, these three policy topics that we'll be talking about, we're not asking members to vote necessarily either for or against, but really whether or not to pursue further research, because we do obviously, this is an in-depth topic and we would need to get further research on it, but of course it does require resources to get that research from volunteer groups. So we're just wondering if there's even interest in even doing that initial step of getting research to really understand what a for-profit universities are all about in other countries. So this is a moment we'll pause now, and we'd invite you to either put in a question in the question box, which is on the control panel, or really, as we mentioned earlier, we like to experiment here and certainly invite folks to raise their hand and ask a question via audio on their computer. And we'll just give a moment here to pause and take people's questions here. So, Michelle, the question from Emily is, what kind of research are you talking about? And she's wondering, would it focus on student experience at the university? Maybe you've got a sense from your committee at all, what type of research would you be involved in learning a little more about this topic?
That's a very good question. I think essentially we haven't got too deep into in terms of student experience, but really what for-profit means in other countries, and like is it the same meaning as it would be in the US? Hence, kind of looking at that. But that's a really good question or topic to research in terms of student experience and what it looks like. I think I'm confident to say that the universities in the UK, though they're for-profit and private, are solid and very good universities, and many of our own colleagues and members have do recommend their students to apply to. So I don't think quality is a question. It's just more or less like, how do we work around the policy that we have and further, incorporate this group of university into our organization.
And can I just add something? Sorry, if you don't mind, Michelle, but I know in our conversations, we've also talked a lot about accreditation would be an important thing that your committee will look at, and to make sure that students would have the pathways to go on to further education or things like that. So I think your committee would look at specific criteria when evaluating these universities if this project were to be taken on, right?
Yeah, and in their initial research already, they're looking at accreditation in terms so what some of the countries they do have, they're accredited by the Ministry of Education. And so it's not, like I said, I feel like we just need to look a little bit more further into what that means, because each country is different, and it's a large, I think what we run up against is which area to look at first. So we may need to just break it down to regions first, and then, so it's going to be a longish process. I'm hoping that we can work quickly and get, if the response from our members are positive into this research. I'm hoping if my team is on this webinar, they will they will understand where we can go with this.
So Anna raises a great point. She said that although she only caught the end of the conversation, she thinks it's always worth looking at how definitions are different in different regions, so we're not imposing US, Canadian definitions and implications where they don't apply. Carol was just asking for a little more clarification, just really, what is the reasoning for wanting to allow for-profit colleges? Michelle, can you speak to that again, perhaps?
Yeah, like I said, like it's different. For-profit, we're looking at outside of US. I don't know if I would clump Canada as US at the moment, but I think we're looking at just US, perhaps outside of US and Canada excluded. But there are the reason why we're looking is because it doesn't mean the same thing. They're not like for-profit universities outside the US and inside and in US. They're not the same definition, and like we can't just blanket generalize that for-profit is for-profit is all the same around the world. And there are quite not a large number, but there's been a few inquiries from universities outside in Europe that are deemed for-profit in Europe. And because we have this blanket policy, they're not able to be members with us. So we want to look and see what that means.
That's great.
Michelle, can I ask, would it be somewhat analogous to say that outside of North America, that for-profit versus not-for-profit might be analogous to public versus private in the US? We have kind of a split of the system in that way, and that would kind of take the North America focus out of the definitions?
Yes, very true. Yeah, exactly. Totally. That's something that we kind of came up upon. That if it's a private, then it's for profit, or in the UK especially, we looked at the UK a little bit further more. So there's more research on the UK at the moment, and it's in the UK if they're a private university, they're for profit. Let's get my notes. I think they are deemed for profit, but they do have like degree granting powers, and students are eligible for tuition maintenance loans. So it's not, so that's what we kind of have, preliminary research. There's definitely more to do though.
So this is a good topic, and I will have to apologize a few times here because we'll probably have to move some things along, and certainly if people would like to come back to some of these, we'll be able to come back at the end. I'm just going to bring up one last question before, well, I'll share a couple of comics here that I'm having coming in. And Ron says there are nonprofit institutions that seem reputable. And he also says that accreditation doesn't always ensure quality. Juan Camilo says, for-profit does not mean bad universities. Countless for-profit universities are heavily regulated by Minister of Education and have been servicing students for years with excellent outcomes. And then one last question I think maybe I'll put to the board nominee for NACAC. Greg asks, does NACAC have a voice in whether we would do this or not? If we do allow them, are we risking anything? So this is related to our bylaws and how we set our memberships based on our bylaws.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And as an affiliate, as one of the 23 affiliates of NACAC, we do have to kind of pay attention to their guidelines and our affiliate agreement that allows us to keep that status. There is a particular part of that in the affiliate policies, which talks about granting voting versus non-voting membership categories, where essentially, if NACAC grants someone membership in a voting category, we have to grant a similar category to that member. But it does say that we may also establish additional voting membership categories or additional membership categories along with non-voting membership categories as we deem appropriate for our affiliate. So we would ultimately need to run any bylaw change by NACAC before we brought it to a vote to make sure that they would be kind of in line and happy with that. But my reading of that, the part about each affiliate may also grant membership and voting status as they wish, to me gives us leave to take the exploration to propose this to NACAC and not run afoul of those policies. So to me, I think that's a thumbs up. But ultimately, we would need to get their okay in the end.
Awesome. So last couple of comments here. Greg mentions if we allow for-profit counselors, and I could say that expands probably to for-profit institute high schools potentially. He says it seems that we should be able to define a threshold for national membership for for-profit universities. And then last word here to Jen. Jen says, thank you for considering asking the membership. Not all countries follow the US model, and if we're an international organization, it's important for us to think that way. And so that's exactly what we'll be doing tomorrow. Again, this question that you see right here will be posed in the survey, so look out for that survey to come tomorrow. So we're going to move on to another question. This one's over to Michelle again. The one other membership policy that we're considering is based around third-party commissioned agents. And Michelle, we will tee this off to you.
Yeah, this will be very quick. As you recall, well, I recall last year at NACAC, my committee, we did a policy review of our membership policy section and did a revision of the language that was in that section. And one was regarding commission-based agents. And after that came out in October, then I believe end of the year in December, there was news that shows that there's been a growing acceptance of commission-based agents modeled being a valid recruiting practice and the increased use of agents in the US market. So just a quick idea of we just wanted to see if our members would be wanting us to research this further, and if there's any thoughts on on what has come out of late. But yeah, this is just an idea.
So here we are. Is the question we'll be putting to the organization via survey is, do you support International ACAC investigating and researching this policy to allow for potential / future membership for third-party commission agents? Again, this is there's a lot of questions, as everyone knows. There's many layers to this, and so before we would even say should they be agents or should agents be members, we would have to provide a lot of a background in terms of some policies around such. So first, of course, is the research. So just get your take on this, and any feedback, questions, again, feel free to either raise your hand and we can go audio for you, or by all means type in a question in the question box here.
Aaron, while we're waiting for people to put their hands up, could I ask, I think maybe Teresa or Michelle, what kind of interest we have from commission-based agents inquiring after membership?
Could I? We don't have, well, we have some. I wouldn't say it's overwhelming. We have some. And of course, they're not eligible for membership. And in working with membership, as I said, we reviewed the policies and bylaws. And looking at our mission statement, it's really the institutions. Many of our member institutions use agents, but it's the institutions who are members of International ACAC. And just for our members who are listening, I mean, we have done some preliminary thinking, discussions, you know, and that's why we want to hear from our members if they feel agents themselves should be granted membership. Remembering that if we do add another group to our membership, we have to consider professional development needs and other needs that, of course, any member group brings to the organization. And then they would have full access to all of our members as well. We have talked with AIRC, which is a group based here in the Washington area that works with agents. We've talked with NACAC. You know, so we've done some preliminary discussions. Whether or not we're going to pursue investigating this really depends on where our members see this going.
Well said, Teresa. So Marcy asked, very simply, what would be the purpose of them joining? And I mean, I could see the argument for the sort of the supportive of them joining would be the, you know, one hand, the educational side. There's been certainly lots of cases of commission-based agents not perhaps asking in the best interest of students. And so there might be some thought that by bringing them in to educate them, to provide networking opportunities for them to connect with high schools, certainly universities might enjoy having them as members so that they can determine some of the better, more efficient, more reputable agents that would be able to meet them through different avenues of our organization. So those are some of the purposes, some of the benefits that an association such as ours could have if we did, in fact, bring them officially into the fold. David comments, commission-based agents should not be allowed. This is ridiculous. Kids are being sent to goofy schools just because a firm can get a commission by having them to do so. Anna says, if commission-based agents were members, I would want to clarify on their terms. If other institutions want to use them, that's up to them, but I would want to be able to immediately identify non-commissioned independent education consultants versus commission-based agents. And that's a good point, certainly a distinction very, very clearly between the two. And that's part of the research, is defining some of these terms would be part of the research. Ron asks, please do continue researching commission-based agents. The sub-agents they hire don't seem to be accountable to the same rules. And that's a great point. There's often sub-agents, and sometimes it's a very vast spider web.
And so this is Teresa. And so just, I mean, really, these are really helpful comments because, well, we want to do research. And part of what we have to consider with any membership organization, and we're a volunteer organization, is if you add a significant number of new members, then we need to fold them into how our organization functions and structures. And that's part of the research and considering. So comments are great.
And Jen raises a good question. For all of these questions, is there any distinction between voting and non-voting membership? And I think, well, do you want to comment on that? Perhaps, Kristen, you want to comment on that?
Well, I think that would become part of the next slides conversation as we look at for-profit members and their role as a non-voting member versus voting member. So I'll thank Jen for the segue if we're happy for me to move into that next part of our conversation.
I think we'll wait. We'll take a couple more questions on this one because there's quite a few questions coming up. But I think, yes, I mean, it's certainly there is, to Jen's point, absolutely, there is non-voting and voting qualifications. I mean, there's other ways that we get around perhaps numbers. So if you're looking at something like conference volume, for example, we don't allow, 20% of our overall population being from organizations for a conference. So there's certainly, we do put caps on particular member types. So that is something we're already doing in some regard.
It's actually less than 20%, but that's okay. But we do have a cap on.
Okay, what's a cap? Chris or Teresa, correct me, please.
It's just about 10%. of our enrollment. Because of our exhibitors, it's bumped up over the years, but we do cap it.
And so there's lots of good comments coming in here. Certainly some around the research. Emily says, sure, there are good and bad agents, but do they need to be a part of ACAC? What and whom can we count on being at ACAC conferences? I think this is a key issue to consider when considering whether we include for-profit universities or agents. And so these are absolutely great points. And certainly when it comes to the survey tomorrow, by all means, if you're not at all even in favor of even researching this topic, then vote no. If you're in favor of maybe learning a little bit more, then vote yes. And I think there is in the survey's question, there's not sure as an option as well. Marcy says Education USA has just started working with agents or not have a negative, and it just says it does not have a negative relationship with them. A few more questions. Okay, and then and Katrina raises a good point. How easy is it to vet agents, determine if they are reputable? Do we have the resources to do so? Stephanie says, yes, I think it's valuable to research the policy. With many international schools here in Cairo, it is difficult for some counselors to reach all students. However, I recognize this is fraught with concerns and would want there to be agreements and policies in place to promote ethics and transparencies. Okay, so that's looks like it's covering the full range there. Certainly, it's looking like there's some interest in learning a little bit more, but definitely some trepidation, and would definitely be very concerned about bringing this in without further clarification around some of the policies. All right, so we're going to move on to another somewhat related question, and as Kristen just mentioned, segue nicely into talking a little bit about for-profit organizations and their voting status.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. And it is like the agent and the for-profit university question, one that has many, many layers and will likely not be a short research process, but one that has kind of come up a lot in the last couple of years. I'll go back, Aaron, you can flick through for me to the next screen. Over time, we as an association have built our policies and our bylaws very much in line with NACAC because of the affiliate agreement and the affiliate association that we have with them. And so we are bound in certain ways to do that. And so our membership policies have grown up echoing and mirroring in I think quite close relation to NACAC's policies. But I think over the last 20 years or so, our membership has maybe outpaced that a little bit. And there, I think, are some differences about international ACAC versus the NACAC membership. And there are differences, I think, from our policies to reflect kind of the overall nature of our membership. Teresa, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we were speaking before we came online about the number of voting members that we have, and out of our 3,400 overall members in the association, I believe it's about 2,300 who are eligible to vote. Is that correct, Teresa?
And at the time of election, however, our membership was not at 34. Our membership at that time, it was before we opened Conference Reg, so it always drops. So our membership was only at about 2,800.
Okay, so we're looking at somewhere between just under about a third of our membership who is not eligible to vote in our elections for their governance. Well, depending on the time of year, that'll fluctuate, but at our largest, just under about a third, and can't vote on association business, cannot hold positions on the executive board to represent that sector of the membership. And I think in the last couple of years, certainly around our elections, this is when this conversation tends to come up. What is it about our for-profit members who are vetted through the membership process, who adhere to the same principles of or code of ethics and professional practices as dictated by NACAC? What is it about that work versus the work of someone in a more traditional or a nonprofit role that kind of precludes them from being part of those conversations, being part of that decision making? And so, as I mentioned before, in response to one of the other questions, we are given a fair amount of leeway to define our own membership roles. Yes, we have to echo the voting membership categories that NACAC has for us, but we do have, at least in my interpretation, the leeway and the power to establish our own additional voting membership categories that are reflective of our membership and our colleagues. Now, that being said, it is a somewhat tangled group. It's a very complicated, complex group of organizations and people who sit under the for-profit umbrella. We have people in ed tech companies, we have tour companies, we have other testing agencies, we have lots of different things that would need to be untangled. And would it be all of for-profit? Would it be certain sectors of for-profit? How do independent educational consultants who are single versus part of a company fit into all of this? There's lots of things to untangle, but I believe that at this point, given our policies with NACAC, that we have room to have the conversation. I don't think that growth in our for-profit sector is going away. And I think it's probably time to at least have the conversation. So that's a little bit of the background and some of the structure that we have to work with.
Kristen, I'm sorry, I just want to jump in with a corrected statistic. Based on right now of our membership is 3119 and 164 are for-profit members. So it's just over 5%. It is not a third of our members, for-profit organizational members. It's just 5%.
Okay.
So there's a little background, and as Kristen outlined, some of the for-profit organizations are the ed tech companies, some of the test prep companies, certainly a larger independent education consultant organization. Any other examples of for-profit organizations that you, anyone, either Teresa or Kristen, wanted to provide, just so people give a sense again of the sort of the context of the examples of?
People who provide tour services for schools and for universities would fall under there as well, I believe.
So those would be all examples of some of our current members of organizations, and but as noted, currently they are not available to be voting members in such matters of our organization. They're not also allowed to run for board positions. However, members can run for committee roles. So any questions on this? Any feedback? Yes, another follow-up from our panelists.
I just want to chime in because the membership committee is charged with vetting individuals and organization member applications coming in. So there is quite a large number, especially leading up to conferences, and we're busy pretty much all year round. So then they are vetted quite stringently. Like my team are dog with bones, which in a very good way. They look for ways to kind of see if they fit in with our mission, and they're wonderful in terms of how they ask questions and that each applications. Teresa knows because she's like, we're a membership organization. We want members. We're like, we know, but we want to make sure that they're good. So they are all vetted quite well, and there's no issues of if they're good or bad apples out there within International ACAC.
And part of this is because, again, in context a little bit on that, is that as a members organization for association for our conference, for organizations to participate in the conference, even they need to be members. And so Michelle and her fantastic team do this hard work to do the background checks, to learn, investigate about the operations of these organizations before they're granted membership and therefore granted ability to attend the conference. So Tony raises comments that these discussions are making me wonder whether it makes sense to review the mission vision of International Association, International ACAC, and undertake the research with those in mind. And certainly that's a part of this is that our mission is to connect the institutions with students with opportunities, and part of this is recognizing that examples of test prep and tour companies and independent education consultant groups that are larger are part of this space, and for them to be able to have open conversations with our universities and with our high schools is allowing us to be in better shape to provide advice to our students and point them in the direction of organizations that are going to be acting in their best interest. But this is also where we want to hear from you folks, because as the members, this is about membership and hearing from you in terms of what your thoughts are on some of these matters. So please do share your comments.
Aaron, while people are doing that, I would also add that in line with our mission and vision, that we also have our guiding principles, which I don't know that all of our members know about, which were adopted, I think it was 3 years ago, which guide a lot of the decision making that goes on with the board, in keeping with, questions about being in alignment with the mission, being student-centered, being responsive to the membership, being inclusive, and I think probably a good factor to roll into, regardless of which of these topics we're considering.
And you can find those guiding principles on the website under About, where you see our mission statement. We have all of them listed there.
Is that what people are seeing on the screen? I'm sharing my screen, but I'm not sure what people see on the screen. Do people see that now? Our website? I'm not sure how it works. At any rate, I see it on the website, internationalacac.org/mission. You'll see International ACA mission statement to facilitate global interaction among counselors and institutions in support of secondary students' transition to higher education while promoting professional standards that foster ethical and social responsibility, and then our guiding principles there and our statement of diversity. So I'll just leave that here. So question here from Anna, are there ever conference sessions aimed at these for-profit service providers to help them better understand the needs of our membership? I get drowned in calls from marketing companies who think they can help us, but clearly have no idea how a small large submission office works. Maybe something to consider so we can help them help us with this. And so that's a question. They are invited to. They're allowed to participate in sessions as long as they bring in other other members, so high school or university members. And then next conference, we are not this conference, but there is already talk potentially of next conference allowing a bit more of a lunch and learn type session that they happen at ACAC. But they are their exhibitors, and that is why we do know that people have this feedback. So by having them in part of the conference, it allows our missions folks to chat with them in that setting.
Well, and I would argue too, Aaron, to Teresa's point about if we were to add the commission-based agents needing to add a professional development stream for them, that if this were if this was broadened out and caps were taken off and voting membership was given, there would have to be, I think, thoughts around perhaps adding a stream that would speak to them at conferences as well, in a kind of more robust manner.
And that's why our undertaking these research projects are really great, because we have to look at so many facets, and members give such good feedback, that it's not just a simple thing. We have to kind of look at how would that evolve over time. So these are really important research projects for organization right now, because we're growing and we continue to change. And these are the things that we bump up against too. Doesn't mean we're going to change them, but to understand it and do the research, because then we make really the best decisions.
And Ron makes the point, please don't let the concern about growing membership numbers overshadow who becomes a member. And that's a great point, certainly something that I don't believe us. We're not in the business of just growing members for the sake of members. And I think for us, it's really about shaping a diverse membership body that represents first and foremost the rest of the world, and provides space for our members, both on the university side, the high school side, and individuals to connect with one another and provide the most adequate information to our students that we're working with. Okay, so just looking at the clock here, about halfway through our 6 topics, and we got 15 minutes left. The next 3, we may not have as much space for question and answers, but we also have a little more, so we have some polls built in. So again, these 3 questions, if you've seen them all already, are going to be coming to you in the form of a poll or a survey tomorrow. And so we'll move ahead here on to the next topic. And I'm just going to make sure I've got my poll set up here. All right, so moving into, we've talked about so far, but it's been about our upcoming policies and doing some research on either membership or voting status. And thank you, Michelle and Kristen, for sharing some background. Now we're looking ahead to, as I mentioned earlier, last year, for really all of last year, we were really building towards a strategic plan, moving us into 2021. And from that, we've shaped really 4 pillars. These are coming from our vision, from our mission, and around really the 4 principal activities that we are engaged in and how we see ourselves as an association. And so you see them here. Connected Community International ACAC will build networks for counseling and admission professionals that span the globe. Advocacy for access, diversity, and inclusion. International ACAC will work to ensure all counseling and admission professionals will have the ability to ethically support students' access to international higher education opportunities. Professional Development International ACAC will be a leading source for international focused admission, college counseling, and professional standards that foster ethical and social responsibility and organizational effectiveness. International ACAC commits to structures that support ways to achieve our vision while staying true to our mission. And so before, these are the guiding 4 pillars. Our next work in the summer will be to certainly put in 3 or 4 clear action driven outcomes for each of these. But before we go to the next step, we just wanted to sort of go to the membership in the way of this webinar and the survey tomorrow to get a feel for if these really represent how you feel our association is in alignment with these 4 pillars, as we're calling them. And so in this regard, perhaps before I go to, I'll let these sit here for a moment, and then I do have a poll question that relate to these 4. So maybe just sit, you can look at these for a few moments, and then I'll post the poll. All right, so the survey tomorrow is going to be around each of these, and you're going to kind of get to have a bit of what is it called? A measure of each of these. But right now, just a very simple poll, or how do these sit with you? And if there's any of the 4 that you're not clear on, we'll sort of go perhaps a little bit less positive and the more negative approach. Are there any of these that you're not clear on? And you can select one of them if one of them is as we need to do some more work on, or if they're all good. And again, it's connected community, advocacy for access, diversity and inclusion, professional development, and organizational effectiveness. And please feel free to read I'll give you a moment to read those. And give it another couple seconds for people to read and vote. All right. Thanks for voting, everyone. And the results are here. So it looks like there's some questions around the connected community. And if there's anything that has the most questions around, is advocacy for access and diversity and inclusion, and our role in that. And that's something that we'll need to put a little more attention to, it sounds like. But it sounds like out of everyone, 77% say all good. And that's great to hear. So I just want to get through the other 2, so we'll have some time to come back around to this. If anyone has any questions specifically on this or feedback, please let us know. Regional support. So we've been doing a number of things globally that impacts all of our members. We've been trying to be a little more targeted in terms of regional through the way of our regional institutes. But we do feel that in the near future, we can take another step in this regard. And so the survey question tomorrow we'll be asking is, we have this list, and I think we also have an other, but we're asking if we can only concentrate our activities and resources into a couple of activities that would be locally focused, regionally focused, what would be most beneficial for your work? And here again, we will have a poll. And so if you want to think about the work that you do, whether it's in your own country, or if you're, say, university missions representative and you're looking to a specific build recruitment in a particular region, growing access to students in a particular region, how might one of these activities support that work? And we'll give it another couple seconds for folks to vote here. So we got a few more votes coming in. All right, and we'll close the poll. Oh, yeah, oh, people, oh, right, yeah, oh, good turnout on this one. It's amazing to see that even though we're coming to the end of the presentation, still we're getting 90% of folks are voting, which means that's a great attention. I know on webinars, it's often you may want to tune out. Thanks for sticking with us. And here is the results. Look at that. Survey says. So it's a real range here, and it would be interesting. And what we will also be able to do when we do the surveys, break this down a little bit in terms of high school voice and university voice, organizational voice. But regional webinars is slowly inching to the top past our regional in-person city meetups and some of the other ones there with newsletters and college fairs. So thanks for that. I look forward to more of this. And we're breezing through some of these last two topics because I want to make sure we have a little bit of time to talk about the last topic. Where do I close the poll? And our last one is one that's I think is really important as any association, and that is on election participation. And so this is where the simple fact of the matter is we had only about 1/3 of our members voted in the recent executive board election, and that was for the variety of VP, but a few VP positions that were available that were open. We also had, of course, president that all the way this year there was a single slate, just the fact to participate and have your voice and vote. It is an online vote held over several weeks, and we were certainly had some feedback where folks were. I think we would like to see more people. This is a membership organization, and certainly there's people in our association are very oftentimes vocal on a number of topics, but we would hope that that extends to participation in voting and supporting our board process. So here we're just going to kind of open it up. We've got about maybe 5 more minutes before we come to the close of our time here. And we'll give a few minutes on this topic, and then if folks want to extend to any other topics, we can do that. But maybe just to start us off, if there's any comments on any ideas or any just general comments on the election process, we are open to taking some of those. We've got a board of presidents, past presidents, membership, and our ED here. So.
And Aaron, can I just, one thing we tried this year that we didn't really work was we tried an incentive. So our GNC, our governance and nominating committee who oversees the election process, was really committed to trying to increase voter participation. And we offered priority registration for the conference to people who voted. And so I think we'd be really open to other ideas for or incentives if there are things we could do, or if you even think incentives are a good idea, because the GNC was really committed to this, and there was some disappointment that it basically made no difference. So just to add that context as you're thinking.
That's great, Johanna. And so there's a couple comments have already have come in just in terms of that one individual says they were disappointed that there were not more candidates. So Johanna, as the chair of the governance and nominating committee, sometimes referred to as the GNC, can you just share a couple of the initiatives? I know there were several that over the past year that your group did to build up more candidates.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the structure, so the governance and nominating committee is made up of a range of members. So it's past presidents, but it's also, we do have for-profit members. We have representation from the diversity committee. So we try to bring in many different perspectives. And we tried to do a lot more in-person outreach to make sure people felt they knew what the positions entailed and what their day-to-day would be like. We do reach out a lot to committee chairs and ask them to identify people. We really see committees as a really good way to start sort of getting your feet into the international ACAC world and then seeing how far you want to go. So we did do more of that. We did a webinar, so we tried to encourage people to just learn a little more about what being on the board was like. And we were quite happy with our slate. In previous years, it does vary year to year, but most of our categories had multiple candidates who did come forward, which is great. But yes, of course, we can always do better. And we, the governance and nominating committee is always thinking of other ways to do that.
Thanks,
Kristen
Johanna.
was on the GNC, if she wants to add anything to that.
Well, no, I suppose that as we're opening this to comments and participation, and I think that the question of, some years having smaller slates than larger slates is, I think we'd be very open to the membership making suggestions about how we could encourage more people to come out for these positions. With a small group of people on the GNC, which does have a little bit of turnover every year because of the dictates by our bylaws, but it's a finite group of people to come up with a finite group of ideas. I don't think that we believe that we have cornered the market on that. And so I think we're very open and very receptive to hearing ideas from the membership that we may not have considered or comes from a different perspective that the committee members would have. So if people out there in webinar world have things that could be really helpful, I think we'd be really open to hearing them.
This is Teresa. I just, as your executive director, and I can't vote, just a couple comments as I've watched our membership grow and change over the last 7 years that I've been working with you. This voting is really key. We were in a conversation, someone said, I get notices from my credit union to vote or my other whatever association I belong to. I don't really pay attention to it. And that resonated because maybe you think, does it really matter? But it does, because by definition, we are a member-driven organization, and I do think that the slate this year was great, and we had broader representation from outside the U.S. And we hope to see more of that, and we hope to continue to reach out. But yet, these are your colleagues who put themselves forward to volunteer to take on a pretty serious amount of work. Serving on the executive board. I mean, so just to acknowledge that, and I'd like to just give you some numbers. You see, Aaron said about only a third of our membership voted. So I just want to tell you that in the last elections, only 401 high school members voted. Only 317 college and university members voted. Only 317 out of 1,200 college and university members. 66 individual members and 22 among our nonprofit and CBO organization members. And 1,519 did not vote. And so
we have some work to do. And Teresa, I just want to, we only a couple of minutes here, so I just want to jump in and we've got some, thank you. We've got some good comments here. Anna shares, this may be on me, but I found it difficult to find info on each of the candidates and felt I was voting blindly. Perhaps I missed info that was sent out about candidates earlier. And so this is absolutely, while we put information on the website, clearly Erica says as well, I think it would be helpful to have more information about the candidate. It can be hard to vote with just the name and not being able to determine who would be more qualified. So clearly we have some work to do around information on who the individuals are and perhaps even the skill sets for some of these positions. Carol says, I'm very new to the organization, so I did not feel as though I was knowledgeable enough to vote. So certainly that's likely a case for, I can imagine, a lot of individuals. They may come for the first time for the conference, and 6 months later or 4 months later, they're asked to vote on something. And I suspect Carol may not be is likely not the only one on such a feeling the same way. So there's some education around that. I think Ganesh says, I think making its presence, I'm assuming the association's presence, felt in this part of the world, more awareness. So just what we are as an association, where it's important to be part of this process. So here's a great suggestion, a little bit different. Could voting take place during the conference, or does it have to take place during a certain month? So shifting things around, and certainly the conference is one time where we have the most eyeballs and people in place. Perhaps there could be a little more to do around that. And Kristen wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, the bylaw geek coming in to add to that. Our bylaws do dictate that the elections have to take place in either March or April. And that is, I wasn't around for the writing of that particular bylaw, but our executive board terms run July 1 to June 30th. And so in keeping with enough preparation for those new folks coming in online, but just very basically, if we wanted to change the timing, it would require a bylaw change. And probably some research and consideration of that question.
Stephanie, yes. So, so part of it, streaming through these things, I want to know the hour here. I just wanted to make sure we get a few more in. Stephanie mentions, can we have a longer voting period? I know this time is coincide with spring break. CS Regional and other events email backlog was serious at that time. If there were some lower level regional committee roles, it might build up more commitment to service and lead to a higher participation in executive elections. So that certainly is keeping with that idea of starting with the committee level, perhaps even if there is extending to some work regionally. Another comment on the Sam wonders of those 317 universities that Teresa just mentioned ago, how many were unique universities? And that's a likely good point. I imagine there's a lot of, there's probably some overlap within those institutions as well. I don't know if we have that data readily available. And last couple of comments here. Anna mentions, would love to see a standardized resume for each candidate. How many years of experience in the board or in the broader field, special projects you've done, or soft skills why you're interested in the role. So right now I believe it is a paragraph. There's some questions, and that could be something perhaps we could look at, is having some little more bulleted, so individuals recognizing time, folks can quickly kind of survey or scan this information. Maybe in addition to just candidate profiles, they should talk about what they do different for the association, what would change if they got elected, not elected. So some deeper probing questions. And then in and maybe close on Rebecca's great comment here. This would be something we potentially be looking at is can the candidates talk to members via webinar for the voting? There's certainly, that's a great thing to be thinking about. That would certainly get some good eyeballs. Of course, it sometimes that may be something that people would be absolutely terrified of doing, I can imagine, and that might actually prevent some people wanting to put their name forward if they knew that they had to do that. And that's certainly, all of these things, there's pros and cons of both of these. Me being on this webinar, I think that's a great idea, but something the next GNC will think about. And some other people have come in here in support of that idea. So there we are. So it is 6:30 a.m. here on the West Coast, which means it's 9:30 on the East Coast, and I don't know, it's probably 12:30 midnight somewhere in the world. But I want to say thank you again. This has been a lot of fun. If there's feedback that people have in terms of this format here, we'll leave the poll open for a moment, but we'll probably say goodbye to everyone. Please, one last couple class slides here is the survey is coming out tomorrow. The incentive to participating in the survey, to submit the survey, it'll be an anonymous survey, but if you want to be entered into the draw to win one of these amazing vests that we're wearing on the screen, some of us, and there we have the leadership group and the headquarters. Complete the survey for your name to be entered into one of 5 vests. We have May 8th coming up for Big Data Webinar Wednesday, June 5th, Conference First Timers, and that will bring us to the close for the academic year of our Webinar Wednesdays. But once again, we want to say thank you for participating. Hopefully this has been helpful. Do let us know if this format has been interactive, enjoyable. We'd love to hear from you, and perhaps we can look to do a few more of these throughout the year. Otherwise, have a great Wednesday or Thursday or whatever day it is in your part of the world, and look forward to seeing many of you on the next Webinar Wednesday. Thanks very much. Thanks, panelists. Bye.